Welcome to 15 Minutes of Pharma. My name is Pereira, Cruz, and my partner in these conversations is Manuel Fernandes. Manuel, in the last episodes, we discussed two important ideas. So, first, the cheapest option is often not the lowest cost, okay? And second, that not all manufacturing capacity is equal. So today, I'd like to connect those ideas to a concept that is often mentioned, but I think really poorly understood, pricing power. So let me start with this question. So where does pricing power really come from in pharma manufacturing?
Well, that's a great question, Carlos, because people tend to think of pricing power as something commercial. Something related to negotiation, positioning, or even branding. But Carlos, in pharmaceutical manufacturing, pricing power is rarely created at the commercial level. It is created upstream in the industrial system itself.
Okay, so it does not really begin with the sales team or at the negotiating table, yeah?
Exactly, Carlos. If you think back to what we discussed in the previous episodes about total cost of ownership, that already gives us a first clue. And that's because, once you move away from price per kilo and start thinking about total economic impact, you realize something important. Price is not the variable that matters most. I would say that parameters like risk, time, and reliability are really critical in this regard. Once those variables enter the equation, pricing power starts to emerge, in a very different way.
So, and Manuel, how would you define it? Okay, so in a simple way, pricing power.
Carlos, I would say something along the lines, something like this. That pricing power really exists when your presence reduces the customer's risk in a meaningful way. Not when you negotiate better or not even when you position better, but when your capability really changes the customer's outcome.
So, and that connects directly with what we discussed in the last episode about capacity, right?
Correct, very directly, I would say, because, if capacity becomes scarce, if it becomes difficult to replace, and if it is not equally accessible from a regulatory or geopolitical point of view, then something very important happens. Some capacity becomes more valuable than other capacity. And, once that happens, pricing power follows.
So that suggests that pricing power is not all the same. So are there different types in the pharma?
There are, absolutely, Carlos. I think it helps to distinguish three fundamentally different types of pricing power in pharmaceutical manufacturing.
Okay, so let's go through them. So what would be the first one for you?
I would say that the first is cost-based pricing power. That is the commodity layer of the system. So at that level, pricing is still driven mainly by cost. And this is typical of commodity APIs. So in this space, capacity is abundant, alternatives exist, and switching is relatively easy. So pricing power is minimal here. Competition tends to push prices toward marginal cost.
So I would say that in that layer, there's really no pricing power or very little pricing power.
Exactly, Carlos. When capacity is abundant and replaceable, pricing power is going to be really weak.
Okay, so you mentioned that is commodities. Okay, and the second type?
The second, I would say that is a scarcity-based pricing power. This is where structural constraints start to matter. This happens when capacity is limited, replication is difficult or is slow, and demand is increasing. This is what we see in areas like the antibody drug conjugates, peptides, and in certain high containment capabilities. Well, here pricing power is not really negotiated. It is imposed by the system because, well, if you cannot replace the capacity, if you need it, you have to pay for it.
Okay, so this is less about commercial skill and more about the structure of the market itself.
Indeed, it is, Carlos. Well, I think that we can say that it is the system itself that creates the pricing power.
Okay. So, and then comes the third type. I believe that it is the most powerful one.
Yes, Carlos.
Okay.
I would say that the third and the most interesting and most powerful is time-based pricing power. Well, this is when, the value of time exceeds the value of cost, to put it in general terms. So, for example, if a 6-month delay destroys tens of millions in revenue, then the supplier who can prevent that delay is no longer competing on price. They are competing on time. And well, that creates a completely different economic logic because now you are not buying material, you are buying acceleration.
Yeah. So yes, yeah. You said completely different logic. So that really changes the frame.
It does, Carlos, because, well, it changes the question the customer is asking. The question is no longer just how much does it cost, but it becomes what is the value of gaining time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you had to bring all this together into one central idea, what would it be?
Well, I would say that pricing power is not one single thing. I would say that it is the result of three factors coming together, which are scarcity, admissibility, and time. And well, those three factors are not distributed equally across the system.
Admissibility. You mentioned admissibility. Okay, so it's an interesting word. Can you unpack that a little more?
Sure, sure, Carlos,
Okay.
because this has major implications, for CDMOs. Take, for instance, the Biosecure Act. Well, that explicitly restricts or discourages the use of suppliers from certain jurisdictions. So this means that, well, capacity may exist physically, but that does not mean it is fully usable from a strategic or regulatory standpoint. So this is where admissibility becomes a key factor in pricing power. Well, Carlos, not all CDMOs operate in the same pricing regime. Some are still competing in cost-driven environments, others in scarcity-driven segments, and well, only a few operate in time-critical environments where, execution speed really defines value. And well, those are very different businesses with very different economics.
Yeah, and this is where something that we already spoke in a previous episode.
Yeah.
So where geography starts to matter as well, right?
Yeah, exactly, Carlos. Geography now plays a direct role in pricing power because, well, capacity that is not admissible does not generate pricing power, even if it exists physically. So we are moving toward a world where pricing power depends not only on what you can do, but also on where you are allowed to do it.
Well, that's a very strong point. So because it means, okay, you may have physical capacity and that's not enough, okay?
Sure. Physical capacity without regulatory, geopolitical, or strategic admissibility may have far less value than it appears to have.
So if you had to summarize the whole discussion in a final synthesis, so how would you put it?
Carlos, I would say something along these lines. Well, that pricing power in pharmaceutical manufacturing is no longer really about price. It's about reducing risk. It's about it's about controlling scarce capacity and about the capability of compressing time.
Yeah. Okay. It's very interesting that saying that pricing power is no longer really about price. It's very, So, and that leads us to a final thought. So for many years, the industry tried above all to minimize cost. But that may no longer be the right question right now.
Yeah, right. I would say going forward, Carlos, the winners will be those who maximize the value of their capacity, because in the end, the real question is no longer what does it cost, but the real question should be what is it worth in the system.
Okay. So, looking into all these episodes, so 7 episodes, so it seems that we have reached a natural turning point in this series. So, what would you say? And what comes next?
Yeah, I think we did, Carlos. I think that episode 6 does close. We may call it the first arc in the series. Uh, well, if I had to describe that first arc in simple terms, I would say this: it was about understanding how the current pharmaceutical manufacturing system was built, how it evolved, and why it is now starting to show signs of strain. You remember we began at the origins with penicillin,
Penicillin.
because that reminds us that this industry was not built only on economics. It was built on industrial capability, public health, and the ability to produce at scale. From there we moved into globalization, into the period where the system reorganized around cost, geographic specialization, and the expansion of generics. We then looked at the rise of the CDMO model and the role of private equity, because this is where manufacturing started somehow to shift from an industrial function to something closer to an asset class. And after that we explored fragility and anti-fragility, because when a system is pushed too far toward efficiency and concentration, it also becomes more vulnerable. That led us into total cost of ownership, where we challenged the idea that the cheapest option is really the lower cost one, once you account for delays, failures, and execution risk. And finally, on last episode 6, we mapped power in the system. We showed that not all capacity is equal, and that capacity becomes power when it is scarce, when it is hard to replace, and strategically admissible. So, Carlos, if I have to summarize that first arc in one sentence, it would be this. The first arc was all about explaining the logic of the system we inherited, and why that logic is now under pressure. That is exactly where the second arc begins, because once you understand the system is no longer stable, the next question becomes inevitable. How is it going to reorganize? So we are shifting the focus now. If the first arc was all about origins and distortions, the second arc will be about reconfiguration. So we are no longer just asking how the system got here. We will be asking who captures value, who controls critical capacity, what kinds of companies become more powerful, why are costs structurally rising, what does the CDMO of the future will look like, why does time start to matter more than unit cost, and how far will industrial policy and sovereignty will reshape what used to be a global market. So episode 6 closes the first arc, and this episode 7, opens the second arc. So for episode 8, we will be talking about why pharma costs are structurally rising. In episode 9, we will be dealing and trying to answer the question, who will control pharma manufacturing? On episode 10, we will be talking about the CDMO of the future. On the episode 11, we will discuss speed as the ultimate competitive advantage, and finally, in episode 12, we will be, dealing and talking and reflecting about industrial policy in pharma, equating market versus sovereignty. So,
Okay.
whole bunch
Yeah.
of interesting subjects here for us to unpack and to discuss.
So this second arc is about looking into the future.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So Manuel, thank you. That was a great way to bring this first arc to a close and to set up the next one. Okay. So, and thank you, Manuel, for being with us again and for helping us understand these changes with such a clarity. And thank you to all of you for listening to 15 Minutes of Pharma. See you in the next episode.